Welcome to Garden-Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today we're on video number 29 of my Beginning Gardener series. And this is going to be one of many different videos talking about fertilizing your plants. Now, we've talked about fertilizing seedlings in the past, but now we're going to talk about fertilizing your plants out in the garden. Now, this is a topic that can take many different videos to cover in depth, and there are so many different opinions and thoughts and scientific studies that are done on it. And so I'm just going to give you my take on fertilization. Now, my background is I do have a 4-year bachelor's degree from Brigham Young University in landscape management. And before that point, I was 100% organic. I would not allow synthetic chemicals to touch my garden for any reason. But once I went to school, I was forced to take, it wasn't my favorite, but I did need to take a couple of chemistry classes. Some of my favorite classes were the soil science classes, and I took quite a few of those. We took classes studying the effects of water and soil together. And through that process, I learned a lot about chemicals and fertilizers and the difference between organic and synthetic fertilizers. And even though I still tried to be mostly organic, I have softened a little bit on the use of synthetic chemicals. Now, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about fertilizers and what they do. Now, we have talked about the components of fertilizer in previous videos, but I want to get into just a little tiny bit more depth. I promise I won't get into really deep depth on here. But plants have nutrients that they need. Just like we need nutrients, plants need nutrients. And most of those nutrients are taken up through their roots from the soil. Now, a lot of the nutrients that plants need are actually available in just about any soil that you have. There are very few soils, other than soils that have been overused or stripped of their topsoils, that don't have a lot of the nutrients that the plants need. So, contrary to popular belief, we do not, as gardeners, need to provide all the nutrients plants need, especially the micronutrients. Now, there are macronutrients, which are things like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which support different stages of growth for the plants. So nitrogen is really important for the green leafy growth of the plant. Phosphorus is important for the growth of roots and the development of flowers. And potassium supports the plant's cell growth and just makes overall stronger plants. Now, those are not the only nutrients that plants need, but those are the main macronutrients that the plants need. If they don't have those nutrients, the plants won't grow. Now, there are secondary nutrients, and I'll put a list of them. We won't cover those because this is a beginning gardener course. But there's a lot of trace nutrients and secondary nutrients that plants need that are usually available in the soil. There are some soils that are deficient in some of the trace nutrients that plants need, and there are definitely soils that are deficient in the macronutrients. So the question is, how do you know what your soil is deficient in and what it has plenty of? And that's what we're going to cover today. And then we'll cover more about nutrients in other videos. So guessing on nutrients and just adding a bunch of different things is not healthy for your plants. For example, most garden soils have plenty of phosphorus and potassium, especially here in the Midwest. That's something that is abundant in the soil, and plants do not need extra added. Matter of fact, if you add more of those nutrients, you can contribute to runoff that damages waterways. You can actually harm or kill your plants. So you want to know if your soil already has enough of those nutrients. Now, the only way to really know is to actually get your soil tested. Now, I have never tested the soil in my yard. This is going to be the first time that I've tested it in 15 years, which is not good. I've basically just kind of guessed that we have enough nutrients. My plants have grown beautifully, and I haven't felt the need. But this year, we're actually going to test the nutrients in my soil. Now, to do that, we're first going to need to decide where we're going to get those tested. Now, there are many different places online that you can go to get your soil tested. You just mail in your samples. They'll give you instructions on how to do it, and you can get your soils tested. There's a lot of really good places. I have not utilized or researched any of those places, but I'm going to get my soil tested at Utah State University Soil Lab. So the process here is really simple. All you need to do is you need to just look up the USU Soil Lab, look at their home soil test kits, and then look at what they have available. I like the Micros Plus. It just basically tells you, the phosphorus, potassium and nitrogen levels that your soil has, and also some of the other secondary macronutrients that you need. They'll test the levels of those. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper on my garden beds and go on to the next test, which isn't listed on the website right here. What you have to do is click on the form. Let's click on the form here, and then look at this list right here. So this list shows all the different tests that they offer, and we're going to choose the $80 test that's going to test salinity, it's going to test the pH, and it's going to show the organic matter. Now we're just going to do that on the garden beds. In my food forest and in my front yard, we're going to do the $45 Macro Plus test because I think that'll be sufficient. Now we need to move on to the tools that we need. So as you can see right here, I have my soil probe. You don't need a probe, you just need a shovel or maybe even a garden trowel, just so that you can dig down far enough. If you look at the directions on the USU website, it says you need to go anywhere from 10 inches to 18 inches deep. They really want to know the nutrient level down where the plant's roots are going to be. So the surface area of the soil is not really that important. Now my soil probe is great because when you use it, it will take a nice deep core sample. So now we're only going to do one sample at a time. We're going to start in the front yard. I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to use the soil probe, push down deep in the soil, and we're going to do it in like 10 different places. We have to have 2 cups of soil to sample to send in. Now once we have all of our samples pulled, we're going to mix those together. We're going to put them in a labeled plastic bag. It doesn't look like they give us the options to name our soil samples. What they do is instead soil sample number 1, number 2, and number 3. So that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to label number 1, and then for myself I'm going to add that is my garden beds. Number 2 is going to be my food forest, and number 3 is going to be the front yard. Now the reason why I decided to do 3 different areas is each of these areas is comprised of different types of soil. My garden beds are homemade soil. They're generally composed of peat moss, whatever compost I can find that year, and vermiculite. And each one of those beds, I usually add blood meal, and maybe every once in a while I'll put an all-purpose fertilizer in, just in case we don't have enough of the macronutrients, because I'm guessing, and I shouldn't be guessing. So the garden bed soil is different than my food forest. In the food forest, I actually had topsoil brought in because my house is up against the mountains and it's basically in an area that is rockfall. So most of my soil is rock with a little bit of clay scattered in between, which is really absolutely perfect for shrubs and trees. The shrubs and trees actually like that type of soil, but the perennials and vegetables, those do not like it as much. So I wanted to be able to plant annuals and vegetables and flowers in my side yard, in my food forest. So I had topsoil brought in. So that is going to be different than my front yard, which is basically whatever fill the builder brought in. There's rocks way down deep, but down about a foot is pretty much a sandy topsoil. So that's going to be a different composition than the other ones. So that's why I'm choosing 3 different tests just to see what they look like. In your yard, if your soil is basically all treated the same, then you can get by with just 1 test. Anywhere where the soil is going to be different because of different types of soil that were brought in or different treatments, those will probably need to be tested separately. So let's go ahead and get out there and get these soil samples. Now between each sample, I'm going to clean out my bucket and soil probe to avoid cross-contamination. So let's get going. Now the last thing that I need to do is fill out my paperwork, which I've already done, take them to a post office, put them in a mailer, and send them off to USU, and as soon as I get the results, we'll bring you back and show you what those results say. So I challenge you to go out to your yard and look at it and see if you feel you need to have a soil test done. If you haven't had a soil test done ever and you're starting new garden beds, I highly suggest doing a soil test. And I'd love to hear your experiences with soil tests, if the results have surprised you or not. So hopefully this video has been helpful. If it has been helpful to you, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.